All right, biology. We're going to get our fourth and final part of our student notes. Just to recall, we've been learning about interactions in ecosystems. We've really been focusing on basically how individual organisms all interact with each other. We've talked about how they interact in their own population with competition. We've looked at how they interact with their own communities. There's predation. They eat each other, right? They'll hunt and they'll kill. Sometimes there's mutualism. They work together in different ways. We've looked at population densities, how a population grows and what causes growth or what causes a decrease in growth. We've talked about tons of stuff with this. Now we're going to talk about kind of how the ecosystem itself grows. So, of course, this is going to include the individual organisms. It's also going to include those organisms as they group up, as they reproduce with each other, and how other organisms kind of stem from lower organisms being there. It's kind of the birth of a food web, if you want to think about it like that. But we have to have all these other abiotic factors, so the non-living things, in place. Otherwise, the living things can't sustain life there, right? So this whole big process is called ecological succession. Excuse me, succession. And this is a sequence or process of changes, life changes that generate a damaged community, a regenerated damaged community, or even create a community in a previously uninhabited area. How did the forest get to the place that it is? Over hundreds of thousands of years, possibly. It came from just having soil and rocks. Then smaller plant life moved in, larger plant life possibly came in after that. Low-level consumers came in. Of course, when they came in, secondary consumers came in. We even do see succession in smaller amounts. There's a video that I think I'll have below here about Mount St. Helen, and that 30 years ago or so, well, now it'd be 41 years ago, there was a lava flow. And how is their life coming back on top of, that was once this lava that destroyed everything? It's because of succession. So succession is a process. It takes time. The huge ecosystems we have now took thousands of years. Smaller, newer ecosystems that aren't as diverse. Remember, diversity has to do with how much, the different types of life there. So less diverse ecosystems are fairly younger. So succession is a sequence. There's two main types of succession that we're going to study about. One's called primary succession. Primary succession, think about it this way, is if there was nothing there and an ecosystem grows there and forms there from nothing. Okay, it typically starts with things like bare rock. Bare rock, just the surface of the Earth's crust, this bare rock. Then there's things called pioneering species, we're going to talk about in a minute, that move in. These are low-level organisms. They're not very complex, but they can break down this rock into soil. Once we have soil, if there's water and there's light in some abundance, we're going to see small plant life. Grasses start growing there. You'll even see some smaller flowers and some small shrubs and bushes. Of course, when we have start getting some of these like seeding type plants, what's going to move in? Plants that have pollen, insects are going to move in, right? Seeding plants are going to cause maybe some birds to swoop in. Anything that can carry these seeds, and that's going to make it bigger and bigger. They're bringing in pollen from outside sources or seeds from outside sources, and we start getting bigger plants. We start seeing small level animals, and then once we start getting things like insects, we're going to have some animals move in that eat insects, right? And then those animals are going to bring in predators that eat them. Okay, and eventually we're going to have a very large, diverse community. Starts with nothing, grows into something very inhabited. That is primary succession. So a key player in primary succession is this pioneer species, right? Pioneer species. These are the first organisms to move into an area. Something called lichens, which is a very cool organism. It's very, very simple. It's some people consider it a plant. Some people consider it a fungus. It's kind of a mixture in between the two. There's kind of a mutualistic relationship going on with plants and fungi to form these lichens. But they're a pioneering species, and also some mosses. What these will do is they're able to grow on rocky environments, so bare rocks where there may not be even any soil. They're able to grow there, and they start breaking down these rocks into livable, usable soil. So these pioneering species move in, break the these rocks down, or even just some soils they'll start living in. These fungi love it, and they're decomposers, so they can decompose some of the living elements in that soil to make more soil, or more nitrogen-rich soil, which will bring in small plants, small animals, larger animals, and plants, and then you've got a super complex ecosystem with a very complex food web. So that was primary succession. Secondary succession is one that we can visually see. We can witness it. The Mount St. Helens video that you'll look at is secondary succession. It's a reestablishment of a damaged ecosystem where the soil is left intact. So think about after a huge fire, after a hurricane, after a tornado like we're very familiar with. Tornado wipes through an area and just destroys a whole forest section. Just takes it completely away. Of course, the animals, they're gone too. They leave the area when they know it's about to be destroyed, or sadly they may die in the whatever tornado or whatever we're talking about. Lava flows, which are so interesting because it completely wipes through an area and just completely destroys it. But where this soil is left intact, we can see regrowth, right? Plants, animals can start this process of regrowth. Look at this awesome chart of secondary succession. We'll see it might be a fire, some type of disaster. 0 years, there's basically nothing. There's just maybe things left from the fire, but there's nothing that's usable for life. Pioneering species, in this case, it may be small seeding plants, right? It may be some grasses that blow in from a neighboring ecosystem. They blow, they take root. The seeds blow in, the grasses and things take root, and they're a pioneering species. They are regrowing this area through secondary succession. They start growing up, these grasses, perennials, shrubs. Then we start having intermediate species, some taller shrubs, some smaller trees. And then before long, we've got a very mature community. All right, and you can see that in as little as 100 years afterwards that it's a real mature community. Just really depends on how complex the ecosystems around this certain ecosystem is, how diverse those ecosystems are. Are there animals that are freely able to move in there from next door, if you want to think of it that way, to eat off these grasses and these plants, right? So secondary succession. The biggest thing to understand about either primary or secondary succession is it's a dynamic process. That just means that it's always changing. Ecosystems, as hopefully you've seen, are very, very diverse, or not diverse is not the word, dynamic, that they're always changing, they're always growing. There's new things coming in. There's plants and animals moving out. Depending on how good a population's doing, it can grow really large and change things. Think about Yellowstone, when we learned months ago now, about the gray wolves being reintroduced. When they left, they completely changed the ecosystem. When they came back, they completely changed the ecosystem. It is a dynamic, ever-changing process when it comes to ecosystems. And primary succession and secondary succession are just the long-term look at this dynamic process. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the very beginning of our notes in case you missed any of our days and you haven't been able to get it from a friend. I'm just going to spend like 3, 4, 5 seconds on each slide. So pause it as you need so that you can fill in your notes. Okay, if this doesn't apply to you, turn it off, and there is no new information coming up. Go ahead and take your quiz and start on your other videos and quizzes with those. Okay, this is for everybody that's missing something. Okay, this is the beginning to end of the notes.